So, sorry, let me make myself a little decent. Today is a sick day. I'm feeling a little bit better right now because I just ate. Hence all the phlegm, too. Let's see if I can put this up a little bit higher. My dog's getting nervous because I'm talking. Oh, she sees a cat. Okay. So I just checked TikTok and I had made a video about the new genetic testing that I had done and what it found. Sorry, that bump is bugging me. And how I popped for hereditary spastic paraplegia or spastic paraplegia type 7. And it definitely seems like in my case it's a complex case. That being said, I have yet to get to speak to a neurologist about these results. It's just everything that I've learned and I know, having over a decade of symptoms and questions and trying to find answers. So a lot of people in the comments on that video were sharing their own experiences and how different conditions are showing up for them, or similar conditions like connective tissue issues or muscle issues. And I thought I would take some time to share how they show in me on both a daily basis, like a typical day, and also on the what I call flare-ups, because there's a definite difference between those days. Excuse me. So today, for example, is a flare-up day. Yeah, I'll start with the flare-up day because it's my reality right now. So on a flare-up day, I usually wake up feeling really strange. Today I woke up with tightness in my stomach, which then continued into my chest, and it makes it hard to breathe. In the past, I was diagnosed with costochondritis, which is inflammation of the rib cartilage. And they found that I had inflammation, they just couldn't really explain it. And I definitely knew like I was having trouble breathing, and it was showing as chest tightness, difficulty breathing, which also kind of leads to lightheadedness and dizziness. And those symptoms are also, heart related. So I would often find myself at least twice a year at the ER being like, hey, chest pain. And they would run, x-rays. One time they did a lung CT even, and they didn't find anything. So they're like, okay, this sounds like, oh, and my blood test would always come back with inflammation, that my body was inflamed, essentially. So like an autoimmune response. And be friends, Sashi. Yeah. Try to sweeten. I know I smell like food. Okay. So yeah, they put me on prednisone for a bit, and then the rib cartilage pain would kind of decrease, and with time and experience I knew to recognize these symptoms as what it was. And I would later kind of correlate the connective tissue issue, the cartilage, with a connective tissue issue like EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Apologies for my slurring with that. Or a similar one like Marfan's. I started to recognize through that there was like a genetic condition going on in my family. It was kind of obvious. Some of us are weird looking, for lack of a better term, and bendy. And I saw it for generations. And that was a very fast realization I had early on into having symptoms and pain and finding these conditions, like this class of conditions. I was not expecting a I don't know, that's not a good way to put it. In general, I wasn't really expecting a neuro-motor condition per se. I knew that I had a movement disorder, and I knew that I had spasticity. Like as soon as it started happening, I was like, I don't know what's going on, but this hand is doing this, and my foot's doing this, and um, over time, I lost the ability to sing for a prolonged period of time. And I used to sing all the time. I was in choirs. I was even in like on the board, and was very active in choirs. Like church choirs and just like community choirs. And over time, it just became painful. Like my throat would just hurt. It would just be like, and I noticed the tightness in my mouth and jaw. I was diagnosed with TMJ, trigeminal neuralgia at one point, and it affects my hearing, it affects my eyesight. All these things just started popping up and then also getting worse. Like, they definitely have not been getting better. Like, no, definitely getting worse. However, in that same process, I did learn to become more aware of what triggered flare-up days. And unfortunately, I'm still trying to figure this one out. Exercise was a huge trigger for my spasticity. Usually, there was something with the recovery period. So I would be fine on the day that I exercised, or the moment that I exercised. But then the next day, or the day after, like 2 days after now, I'm usually like, okay, well, we need to watch to see how my body reacts, because sometimes it clenches up. And it would be so painful. It would trigger my movement disorder with it. I would have stuff that looks like dystonia, where my head shoots off that side. This hand flies up. I mean, I know I have videos on TikTok even of me unfortunately smacking my husband in the face because like it just happens randomly. I will feel all these muscles tense, and years and years and years ago, I had an EMG done of my neck because I recognized that I was having all this neck pain and these issues with this shoulder. And they did find that I was having spasms in my neck, but we never really found out the cause. And this has just been getting worse and worse and worse, regardless of PT and any exercise I was doing. At my healthiest, I was able to do like 3 pull-ups, like I was pretty strong for me, pretty strong for me. And I was doing yoga every morning. I was biking for like 3 hours every night. I was very active. And I was also very spastic. And so when I started allowing myself to rest more than exercise, I noticed my spasticity did go down. And this is a sore topic because for HSP, one of the biggest recommendations and one of the biggest things you'll hear is if you don't use it, you lose it. But I found that I was it's a double-edged sword, because there were such benefits with exercising, but it really lowered my quality of life at the same time. And so what do you do? So I've also found that hormones definitely affect spasticity. And currently I'm pregnant, so I don't really have as many flare-ups, which is kind of cool. But when I was getting my period regularly, twice a month, so like around ovulation and then right before my period, when hormone fluctuations were at their height in different ways, I'm not sure how it relates, but it does. I found that for me. Then I would have horrible episodes of spasticity and flare-ups. And it also relates to like intimacy. So if I was getting close to a partner per se, if you know what I mean, it would be triggered and I would be very sick the next day or things like that. Any heightened stress. So getting in a vehicle now has gotten to the point where it stresses out my nervous system. The amount of noise, the amount of sound, that's the same thing. The amount of noise, the amount of light and visual stimuli is too much on my optic nerve and my auditory nerve, and they spasm for lack of a better term, and they become overstimulated, and then it'll cause me to become spastic, and it'll cause me to have my movements and everything like that, and it gets worse. It's really bad. And so I have to limit my amount of driving because that stress really does impact my nervous system. And even whenever my husband is driving, I have to lay back in the chair and I have to like really work on my breathing and try and bring my stress level down on an emotional level to help control the spasticity. And it doesn't control it, but it helps lessen a little bit. Other random things like my bladder being full, extra pressure on my spine will cause spasticity. And it's so strange. Eating too much, putting extra pressure on my spine will trigger spasticity. Like it's a balancing act. And so my flare-up days are very frustrating because my entire left side of my body, like all the nerves, even into my head, will be so tight. And sometimes I'll have to talk like this. You can see the twitch. So this feeling is actually a kind of sensation I have on the left side of my body, and if I tense and I allow it to do that, it will cause like a spasm as soon as I relax. It's really, I almost said it's interesting. I'm fascinating. It's I can get frustrated by this, or I can continue to see my body as a fascinating case study that I am trying to learn and respect, you know? And I find it healthier to view myself that way, because back in the day when I was very newly dealing with symptoms and I was scared and doctors didn't know, and these symptoms seemed so random, and so they didn't put everything together, it was scary, and it would make it worse, you know, because stress. I lost my train of thought there, sorry. But yeah, flare-up days, really bad. They suck. I hate them. They're very painful because having these tight muscles, and they'll be tight in certain areas and then release, and then it'll be tight in another area soon after, but it's like hours of this experience. For years I used to describe it as it felt like there was a string from the top of my head to my toe and into my arm that just felt like it was pulled too tight and I couldn't release it. And so when I would have flare-ups, there were certain positions where I was more comfortable to like bend over so that my spine wasn't straight, and this tightness sensation was a little bit lessened, you know, like it was like a little shrimp. I could curl in on myself a bit. And holding my arm up like this, I had to do a lot, like up this high across my body when I was in physical therapy, and I would have my spasticity flare up. And I remember my physical therapist one day being like, okay, well, just have it where it's comfortable. And like even lowering it past here, right here, is tight and it feels bad at this angle. But like having it resting and it's just like loose. And it's weird because I'm a spastic, but I also have weakness in the hand. So I can use this hand, I can open it, but it hurts. It's just tight. And so it feels more comfortable just having it like this. So if I want to go about my day-to-day life, I'll take my hand, and this is my good hands. My husband says, this is my strong hand. He quotes that all the time. So like say I'm picking up something, this hand will be like this. I won't use the fingers, the fine motor details, because it kind of triggers the spasticity. And so I'll just be like, but I can do this. And I like to joke, I'm like, hello. Oh, that looked bad. But I'll just like flail it around like, you know, I can use it normally, but I just really can't. I could. This is important to note. I can open my hand and stuff, but it's very uncomfortable, and it does make things worse. And so those are the main ways. I don't know how concise that was. I am very spastic in my hips as well. That has been a part of my life for probably the longest time, and I can't do steps very well at all, if at all. I usually have to step like 1 foot and then the next, and 1 foot and then the next on each step. And I hold on to all the railings in the world. When I'm walking around my apartment here, I didn't even notice this at first, like how I was accommodating myself, but I do hold on to, I at least touch or put my hand on something to stabilize myself as I walk. And this was something I noticed in my mom growing up, and I thought that was just like an old person thing. Not that my mom is like super old, but she's old, you know. But no, as my weakness in my legs has progressed, I definitely am a lot more aware of how much I have to stabilize myself using my environment. So I'll hold on to chairs, I'll hold on to tables, and I'll just boop, there we go. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. It all made so much sense when I got the results of the genetic testing back. I was like, oh my gosh, finally something like, yeah, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. Another thing that I really want to talk about is urinary symptoms, because that was honestly one of the most baffling aspects of like all of my symptoms that popped up. It was so random. I was in a healthier stage of my life. I was fit, I was thin. Not that, weight is necessarily an indicator of your health, just so we know this. But at the time, I was fit, I was thin, I was active, but I couldn't pee. I couldn't empty my bladder, and it would stop and start, and it fell in spasm. That was the best way I could put it at the time. And so I had extensive testing done. I went to a urologist. I was the youngest in the waiting room, especially because most of the people that were there were men, because prostate issues. Pretty sure I don't have prostate issues. And so they ran all these tests, and some of them were very uncomfortable. And oh god, I do feel like it was one of the first times that we caught on a test actual proof that I had a problem, like that something was happening. Because one of the tests, it measured how much you could empty your bladder, and if there was any left in, and I did have a bit left in, and we never really found a cause for it. And so we assumed it was in my head, right? Like, we're assuming all of this stuff is in my head. And I mean, to a certain extent, it is, right? It's a neuro condition. But we really couldn't find all of the things that brought these symptoms together and made it make sense. And nearer to my big diagnosis, my big realization, I had a lot more doctors on like smaller scales, like an audiologist or an eye doctor, things like that, who were very validating, and they're like, yeah, it can be really difficult. Oh, and a neurosurgeon. It can be really difficult to figure out what's going on when you have so many symptoms and so many systems involved. And I appreciated that, because up until that time, doctors often would say, well, you have all this stuff going on, it's obviously in your head. They would just write it off. But finally, someone like, when doctors finally take you seriously for a little bit, and not that it's not serious if it is psychological, but they gave me the benefit of the doubt that I had done enough work on myself, mentally as well, that they looked into it from a medical standpoint. They did not take my anxiety, my depression personally, or they didn't let it bias their opinion. They allowed it to stay medical, and I needed that. And I mean, honestly, it wasn't until I advocated for myself, though. It wasn't until I sought out a genetics counselor. I was like, I know this is genetic. Let's start there. And I'm pretty sure it's affecting muscular, because I've got these muscle spasms. Like, that's a good area to start to look. And then I knew that I was bendy, like hypermobile. I'm pretty sure connective tissue issues. And my genetics counselor, we worked for about 6 months, because I was in between getting new insurance, which thankfully when I got new insurance, it covered the full genome sequencing, and before that it would have cost me like over $1,000 something. But with it I only had to pay $100, which was amazing. And then I did the spit test for in vitae, and my genetics counselor got the results, and we scheduled an appointment. It was all through Zoom. He was very helpful. He had put together a PowerPoint. He showed me everything I popped for, because I popped for 2 conditions, and in my research so far they're very closely related, and one of them seems a lot more serious than the other. But all of my symptoms point to the HSP7 for sure. Like clear as day, I have all these symptoms. And yet other ones, which is why I am under the impression that I have a complex version. And I'm just putting that out there, that this is just a self-diagnosis at this point, but it's pretty clear to me, the one living with it, that this is a complex, because it's annoying. And there are certain symptoms I can't quite find this condition including. So it's like, for example, most of the HSP diagnoses affect the lower motor neurons, but obviously I have like dystonia like symptoms in my upper. So I have questions still, but I have learned a lot about this so far, and I'm incredibly grateful for everything I've learned through the HSF, I think they go by, like the Hereditary Spastic Foundation. And they have a support group on Facebook that if I have a symptom now, I go in, I search to see if anyone has talked about it, and I can usually find other people that's like, oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's been helpful trying to figure out symptom progression too, because that's a big concern of mine, is how long do I have before I lose my eyesight? How long do I have before I stop being able to understand voices? Things like that. And we can't know these for fact, but it's helpful to have some other people's experiences available for me to feel a little bit more informed and help me feel a little less alone. So that's also a reason why I think I sat down to make this video. I really haven't opened up too much about the condition itself to too many people other than, the whole world on TikTok and like a little bit on Facebook. That's about it. But I've really been going internal at this time and just like trying to educate myself. And I also don't want to make statements and theorize too much before I meet with an actual doctor, So I want to go about this the right way. I'm keeping myself busy. I am giving myself grace on bad flare-up days. And yeah. So today was a bad flare-up day, and I compensated by taking half of a baclofen because I'm pregnant and there's not a lot of literature about the effects of baclofen on pregnancy. So I'm trying to limit it as much as possible, but I also would like some relief, and I do have some relief. Look at him. Look, I can move him. He hurts still, but that's okay. We'll just keep him right here and we'll be like, that's fine. You'll be okay. And I also feel like my chest, which is where a lot of the pressure was today, has released a little bit. My throat has released a little bit. It definitely really hurts in back here. And while I'm sitting, my foot is fine, and like my leg feels fine, compared to maybe an hour ago when I'm just laying here as a shrimp and just physically just feeling these spasms, and it's just pain. And like okay, so me and my husband, we're legally married, but we're having a ceremony soon, and so we're having like a wedding, and we're getting gifts in, and I got a big ol' set of new knives right here, and I'm eyeing them, and I'm like, oh my god, it would feel so good to just cut my leg off right now, just my leg, just like get it off. It just hurts, and it's just this neuropathy, it's just this pain. I'm not gonna cut my leg off, don't worry guys, but like the pain is just so constant, and just, I know unrelenting is the same as constant, but I feel like I need to overemphasize how frustrating it is. Yeah. So thank you, Baclofen, for giving me some relief and not making me too tired this time around, so that's good too. This is really long. I think I'm just gonna have to upload it to YouTube instead. I don't feel like editing it. Can you all accept me as I am here on this flare-up day? Let me know in the comments if you relate and what your symptoms are, if you're comfortable sharing that. Obviously, I'm not pressing. I'm just looking for a community, and it's been helpful for me, so yeah. Okay. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Maybe.